Marriage/engagement photographers/videographers of Reddit. Have you developed a sixth sense for which marriages will flourish and which will not? What are the green and red flags? Ex-wedding photographer. Typically I saw red flags when a bride or groom is super quiet. I mean silent and just watching. One instance was a groom who barely said 10 words to anyone during the ceremony or reception afterwards. The bride and her mother were extremely loud and excited the entire time. The bride needed everything to be perfect. I dropped off the photo bundle with him 2 weeks later and he was still quiet. She, however, complained about all of the pictures because the groom wasn't smiling enough. She wanted a discount because I couldn't make him look happy enough. They got divorced about a year later. I know because I did his engagement photos with his new fiancée about 4 years after his first wedding. His engagement photos showed him much happier. Edit. I stopped doing weddings, but I do some portraits and mostly commercial and product work. He called me for a wedding quote, but I had stopped doing them at that point. I still do portraits, so I offered to do engagement photos for him that he was happy with. Story 2. Photographer here. I've done a few engagement photos and weddings. Red flags. When one person is critical of the other during the shoot, but then posts the photos with the caption, "About to marry my best friend and my soulmate." Also, when they badly Photoshop themselves and their partners to appear better looking than they actually are. Green flags. A couple who can laugh together when doing awkward poses, when they're wiping sweat from their foreheads, and when something goes wrong in general. Edit. Goodness, this blew up. To answer a few questions, I only edit the lighting and background of photos. I've never and will never edit someone's body. Once I've been paid for my edited photos, I do believe the photos belong to the couple and they're free to tweak them any way they like. Although, I do think there's no need to edit your face/body. People who are truly happy for you don't care how perfect you look in your photos. Besides, I think that genuine love and happiness makes the most beautiful photos, not a slim waist and perfect skin. To address the wiping of the sweat, I did a photo shoot for a couple in the middle of an intense Texas summer. It was incredibly hot and humid that day, and the man was sweating rivers. Him and his fiancée were such good sports about it, though. I've done photo shoots for brides-to-be who get extremely offended and angry when their partner does not look perfect. I was very happy that this particular bride-to-be just had a good time taking silly photos with her fiancé. Honestly, their photos turned out great. Story 3. Photographer here. To me, the biggest sign is the cake cutting. Some people like to smear the cake everywhere as a joke. Some people don't. Usually the couple is in sync about this. They know what the other would like and they don't smush cake on the other's face if they wouldn't want that. Sometimes one of them, usually the groom, will force cake all over the other's face and embarrass and upset them. I've seen this happen a handful of times and all those relationships that I've kept up with have ended in divorce. Story 4. Wedding videographer here. I try to get to know both people beforehand so I can work in their hobbies/unique traits into my product. A big red flag is when one person is clearly trying to change the other. I had one dude who loved poker, craft beer, cigars, hanging with his rowdy friends, video games, etc. I planned a cool shoot where I had all his friends in an Old West saloon, and he sees his bride-to-be, etc., but she steps in and declares, "Oh, he won't be doing any of those things anymore." Poor bastard just sat there in silence as I awkwardly had to plan them shopping for a Yorkie puppy instead. Halfway through post-production after the wedding, he called and said he was getting an annulment. I wanted to say, "I could have told you so," but I try to stay neutral. Green flags are just the opposite. Embracing the other person's habits/hobbies/interests, basically not being a controlling freak show. Story 5. Cake artist here. I had a couple come in for a testing. Appointment was for 7 p.m., but he was late. First half hour was just her. She told me that they met at a stable where they both kept their horses. Their horses were going to be featured at the wedding, as the bride and groom would ride them to the site. Beautiful farm venue. She described in detail her self-designed medieval gown, flower wreath in her hair, embroidered shoes like some from a museum. Sounded lovely. She wanted a cake and a castle, which was a specialty of mine. The whole wedding would be over the top, but not in a cringy way. Then he arrives, barely says hi to her, sits down and starts telling me about his wedding. He'll ride in dressed as a riverboat gambler with a frock coat, brocade vest, string tie, big hat, gold pocket watch, and sterling silver spurs. He's fine with the castle cake, but wants to incorporate the watch and a pair of mother and pearl-handled pistols. Picture given. I had already decided that I was not going to work with them. No way could I come up with a cake that would work for them. But they were there, so I brought out the samples. For the next hour, they carried on two entirely separate monologues. They didn't address each other or me, and they didn't listen to each other or me. I made no attempt to book them that night, and when they called later in the week, I told them that their date had already been taken. They were living in two incompatible and entirely self-contained fantasies. I doubt they even made it to the wedding day. How can you be this disconnected with someone that you're about to marry and presumably want to spend the rest of your life with? I don't understand. And I know this isn't going to be the only story like this that we hear, but it's like, man, no. Story 6. Ex-wedding photographer here. There were only a couple situations where I had doubts about the couple's future, and one where I was certain. 1. I met the couple in a cafe to discuss their ideas and my services. The girl was very happy. She was very emotional and interested. The guy, however, was rolling his eyes and grunting at everything, and I stopped trying to get him involved in the conversation after he ignored me twice. It made the girl very uncomfortable, and she was apologetic for his behavior. I don't know what happened to them, as they apparently chose to reschedule their wedding and didn't hire me in the end. 2. I declined shooting a wedding when the person who was going to hire me was the groom's mom. When I asked her to arrange a meeting with the couple, she said that they didn't want a wedding, meaning they wanted to elope, and it was her initiative to celebrate it. I tried to play I want to hear bride's ideas card, but she told me the bride has no ideas. She obeys the groom, and the groom obeys mom, so I'll only talk to the mom. So I declined. I hope the girl is fine. No one deserves a controlling MIL. Story 3. Finally, I was a guest and a photographer at my friend's wedding. The bridesmaid was wearing a short white dress and she was chirping about her side hustle modeling for photos and catalogs. How her boyfriend saw her in so many wedding dresses he won't be surprised when she wears one to the wedding, and how she caught 8 bouquets already. This will be her 9th. She talked a lot about wedding planning and stuff, but apparently there hadn't even been a formal proposal, and her boyfriend, who was a guest as well, looked very annoyed and clearly wished he were somewhere else. Anyway, the bridesmaid started bugging me for photos of her and her boyfriend a week after the wedding. I told her several times that when I start editing the photos, I'll do hers first, and by the time I sent her the photos, they were already broken up. She started dating someone else a month later and got married the next year. Story 7. Wedding videographer here. I don't usually follow the marriage all that closely after the video's delivered, but usually you have a feeling as a neutral third party about whether it's going to last or not. While I agree with most of the stuff mentioned here, I've found that the microcosm of how the couple feels about each other usually comes out during the cake cutting. If they're drinking, then they've usually had a few by that point, and it's a moment when everyone is watching you do something potentially awkward with your new SO. When I see a new bride or groom aggressively smush cake into the other's face, I usually feel like that's a strong sign of an unbalanced relationship. Sometimes they're both having fun with it and you can tell it's cool, but most of the time you can tell that the person with the cake on their face is either shocked or angry about it. Again, I don't have hard data to track results, but that's the thing that usually informs my opinion about how it's going to work out. Story 8. Used to be a wedding planner. Red flags. Constant apologizing for their other half's behavior/attitude. Lack of input from one of them. Too much input from a family member. Anger. Inability to make a decision and stick with it. Overriding a once joint agreement of something. At one wedding, I didn't actually meet the groom till the day of. I just knew his name, Joseph. Edit. Also, when they're very young/have a small child and or haven't been together long. Green flags. When a couple mutually respects the other's wishes and compromise. Both present at every meeting. Supportive and patient. Friendly and respectful of staff. When you can tell they're both relieved to see one another again and it's like no one else is there, it's like an unspoken conversation with each other and it makes me smile. Story 9. And I have to tell this one too. I didn't need a sixth sense when I heard that on their honeymoon, the bride cheated on the groom. So the groom's parents didn't want the photos or the video I had shot. Instead, they wanted me to sue her for the remainder of the money they owed me. I told them I was sorry, but they signed the contract, so they had to pay. The bride was a total female dog to him all day at the wedding. It was no surprise she did this. He was absolutely heartbroken. And yes, they sent me a check for the remainder, and I still have all the photos, developed and collecting dust in a pile still in the lab bag I brought them home in. This was in 2003, and I can't bring myself to throw them away. The best part? The groom called me 2 years later to do his wedding photos and video because he was getting married again. I was all set to do it, and then the new fiancé pulled the plug. Turns out she didn't want any memories of the first wedding being involved, so I was fired as soon as I was hired. Story 10. A friend of mine is a fairly successful engagement/marriage photographer, as well as a relationship blogger. She says she can tell how in love a couple is based on whether they pay attention to each other during the photos or her, the photographer. I guess it's the contrast of sharing an experience together versus fretting over optics. I've never heard her mention specific red flags, but she speaks very highly of couples who are willing to be silly and adventurous in their engagement shoots over those who are just taking the most glamorous/streamlined portraits. ETA, I should have specified, she's a wildlife documentary-styled photographer. She doesn't pose people, she follows them around as they hike, rock climb, build campfires, whatever. That's why their attention is significant. It's supposed to be a candid experience and capture their natural dynamic. Story 11. I am/was a wedding photographer. I think you can kind of tell if they're going to stay together forever based on how they handle all the little, and sometimes even big, problems a wedding day can bring. There was one couple story I'd love to tell. They're not your typical bride and groom. They had their wedding in a forest where you could also go climbing. Sorry, don't know what they're called. With a big wooden house and a fireplace in front. All vegan food and a lot of friends with lots of dogs. Everything was perfect, except the special dress the bride had made and painted didn't arrive in time for the ceremony, and she was devastated. She was in her sweatpants and a Mickey Mouse t-shirt at that time, and her soon-to-be husband took off his suit, put on a big white shirt, stood there in his boxer shorts, and just said, "Well, we have to go," because the ceremony person had to leave an hour later, and she just laughed and went with it. I was in shock, but other than it being strange to have hairy man legs in my wedding photos, taking the pictures was really fun, and they were totally relaxed. I'm pretty sure they'll be doing well. Now that's pretty freaking awesome. I think that that's what any man should do for their bride, and vice versa if the situation was reversed. Yeah, it's like the old saying goes, double the pleasure and divide the pain. So if something like that were to happen, let's just make lemonade out of the lemons, so to speak. So no, that's really cool. Good for you. Story 12. I used to work in day of wedding coordination, and I remember two couples that I couldn't wait to hear about the divorce. When you pay a wedding coordinator, you only pay for the things the coordinator orders/plans. Flowers, catering, DJ, plus coordinator fees. Anything else couples buy. Dresses, gifts, suits, etc. are added. We estimated this to be a $500,000 wedding. Easy. Dad paying for all of it. The bride was a total sweetheart when I met her. The groom seemed quiet, but was very easygoing. Always nice to have a sober groom, and he didn't drink a drop during the day. Then the photographer/videographer left to take some venue shots. The bride began berating everyone, myself included, on how her perfect day had to be capped out because no one wanted to give her more. My clothes were trashy, the DJ's computer was a PC, the bar staff were wearing red vests and she hates vests. Photographer came back and she was an angel again. The second was a wedding of a general and pediatric surgeon in the local hospital. Paid for their own beautiful and in their means wedding. The bride was seriously amazing, but there was a mix-up the day of the wedding. The 200 chairs that were supposed to be moved to a third story of the historic building weren't taken upstairs. So my boss, the other assistant, and the 8-month pregnant venue coordinator start carrying chairs upstairs. 3 flights. It wasn't great. After the wedding, we had to do it again, but down. The father of the groom started helping us. We begged him to enjoy his son's day, but he responded that if it were his daughter doing this, he'd be furious. Groom comes by and tells his dad to stop helping the pregnant woman stack chairs. He looks at the monster that is his son and asked how he'd feel if it was his wife or sister who had to do this. Groom told his dad that maybe if we had applied ourselves a little more, we wouldn't have been taking out the trash at a successful couple's wedding. Clearly, he didn't know how much his wife was paying us. Story 13. I'm a videographer. Most weddings we video are fairly smooth. Couple is happy, family cries tears of joy, lots of laughter, that bit. We did film one wedding that seemed fine right up until the aisle walk. We video the bride and groom prep. They have 2 suites, one for the ladies and one for the gentlemen. My partner and I were having an easy time running back and forth. Everyone is drinking, not light beer either. I mean, knocking back shots. Empty bottles everywhere, offering us rounds too as they go by. Everyone is pretty carefree, upbeat, and ready to party. The bride and groom most of all. This is going to be the easiest wedding we film, or so we thought. Now everyone is seated in the ceremony hall. Groom and all his men are up front with the officiant. Bridesmaids start walking down the aisle, all beautiful. The bride walks in with her father. At this point, I'm filming the groom and his reaction. We get a wide shot because we can always zoom in during post. My partner is recording the groom and her father. I see the best man in my viewfinder pull out a flask from his jacket pocket. The rest of the men do the same except groom, so this is clearly planned. The best man speaks loud enough over the music so people turn to him away from the bride. He raises his glass high and shouts, "Here's to bride's name. Here's to groom's name. May you never disagree. But if you do," he points at the bride with his flask and finishes, "F you. Here's to groom's name." They all drink to their frat boy toast. The best man hands the groom his flask and he drinks it, laughing. I've never watched a video more than I have the reaction of the bride and her father. Jaw dropped, speechless. The ceremony went on, and it's not done. The officiant asks the bride, "Do you take the groom, yada yada," and she surprisingly yet weakly says yes. The officiant asks the same of the groom, and instead of just saying yes, he screams, "F the F, yeah I do!" Bride just facepalms herself in embarrassment. The look of disgust on her whole family's face the entire night after that was priceless and highly awkward to film. I could go on with more stories about this wedding, but this just about the bride and groom. Needless to say, I think that's a big red flag. TLDR, best man raises his flask, his bride is walking down the aisle and says, "Here's to bride, here's to groom, may you never disagree, but if you do, F you," pointing at the bride. "Here's to groom." All groomsmen drink from flask, including the groom. Story 14. Wedding photographer here. Been shooting for a while. Of late with a reputed brand in Singapore. I don't think anyone knows me on Reddit, so I'm pretty safe. I'm also recently married, so I understand the signs I see, having gone through them, and hopefully and thankfully are able to recognize and can be mature through them with my wife when we see them surface. Disclaimer, not all the time the red flags equate to breakup in marriage. You'll be surprised how durable relationships are and how much compromise and forgiveness goes through a marriage. If you can't understand that, you either need to experience marriage or are too immature to understand it. Red flags. Bride/groomzillas. I tend to eliminate right from the start these people because it means certain trouble for vendors like us because their demands show their personality. Often these demanding, it's about me attitudes are a major downfall in relationships and marriages. The couple refuses to pay. If you're basically going to be an a-hole to vendors, there's no way you won't be an a-hole to your partner at some point, because money is a big issue and it often means that it will become an issue to either of you down the road. The couple argues in front of you. I've seen it happen. I've seen a couple early in my first few shooting years. It happened a lot when I was starting out because I was going for cheap while entering the industry because of the lack of my experience, which means you get people who only go for cheap, which also means they're really cheap people. And I encountered a couple who met me to pick up the pictures, and they look like they just had a really big fight before meeting me. The couple invites tons of people to the wedding dinner banquet. Chinese dinners are 8 to 10 course dinners and are quite expensive per seat. And there are tables empty. We're talking each table on top of 10 people costs around $2,000 when the banquet begins. The couple splurges super big time on the wedding, and I enter their house and I see them actually living as simpletons or from very humble backgrounds. Knowing their professions also tells me that they're clearly not able to afford this wedding. I know immediately it's going to go downhill from there with the debt they're already carrying into their marriage. Good luck paying off the $100,000 wedding before even buying your house. House and car here in Singapore is impossibly expensive. At least $100,000 for a car and between $500,000 to $1 million for a house. Go look it up. Green flags. The couple makes the wedding about their guests. The couple meets every person and thanks them, and people can't wait to help them and support them through the wedding. I can't emphasize this point anymore. People literally come round to help these people and stay late and sacrifice time willingly because they love them. These guys have something great about them that everyone sees that they're going to last for sure. The couple accommodates every vendor and pays on time. They know what they're doing. When I see the couple encounter a really massive screw-up, how they react is really the deal breaker for me. I've seen the lights go out at the banquet hall for a good 30 minutes, and the guests were already kind of freaking out, but the bride and groom stayed chill. I instantly knew they were going to last. If they could be cool through a massively big day in their lives, they'd be cool when rocky stuff happens. I might have more later. I'll come back to edit if I think of them. Again, the disclaimer. There often isn't a hard and fast rule to whether they stay or break, but the TLDR is if they're a-holes and think about themselves, they often crack later on at each other. If they're caring to each other and people around them, it usually lasts for good. Story 15. Not a photographer, but have been a wedding makeup artist for a decade. For me, I don't often meet the husband, so this is more my observation of the bride. I have a feeling my face looks like I'm trying to smile during a diarrhea attack, when I'm thinking, you poor thing, about the hubby. Red flags. The bride already trashed on mimosas at noon. The bride ordering everyone around. Bride having a meltdown about stupid crap like seating arrangements. Mother-in-laws that refuse to even sit next to each other to get makeup done. Bride talking smack about hub's family. Bridal party fighting with each other. Caring more about spending a ton of money and being a fancy pants than being kind to your loved ones. Green flags. They had Dick's Burgers and a keg for the food/drink. Super laid-back people. When literally everything was going wrong, the bride and family were laughing and hugging and sorting it out. Like caterer didn't bring enough food. They ordered pizza. DJ didn't show. Bride made a playlist on her phone of her hub's favorite music. And then my fave, they were both Harry Potter fans. The pre-ceremony gift and card, they gave each other the exact same gift and card. It was sweet as hell. Story 16. I'm not a wedding photographer, but I had my own intuitions about a couple once that turned out right. I went to a wedding with my girlfriend at the time a few years ago. She and I had only been together for about 6 months, so it was actually the first time I had met either one of them. I didn't say anything to my girlfriend at the time because I didn't know them at all aside from the story she told me, but I felt like they wouldn't last very long. At the reception, she spent most of her time just talking with her friends and didn't interact much with anyone else at all. He went around and tried to get time with everyone, but every so often I would see him with her and she would kind of not even acknowledge that he was there very much. When I walked past her one time on the way to grab a beer, she was bragging to her friends about how much money the dress cost her and how he wanted her to get a cheaper one, but she wouldn't have it. At one point of the night, I was outside smoking with some of the other guests, and he came out the back and asked to bum a cigarette. He was one of those types of people that only smokes when they're drunk, which apparently wasn't that often for him since he was doing his residency at a hospital, so he was always really busy. The entire time, he kept looking at the door, and whenever it opened and someone came out, he quickly moved his hand holding the cigarette behind his back because he thought it was her. It was like he was deathly scared of her, and not in a playful way. It didn't surprise me when about a year later they got divorced. Apparently, she just kind of was taking advantage of him, staying home all day, she didn't work, spending thousands of dollars ordering clothes and shoes online, and using his money and credit cards she took out for them. Story 17. Wedding videographer here. Had a couple fly us out to Iceland for their engagement shoot. Now, the first couple of days were fine and everything looked okay, but in Iceland, some lodging options aren't very luxurious. The groom chose to book what was essentially a tiny bunkhouse, the ones meant for those summer camps, and the bride lost it and complained the whole night. Next morning, things are pretty tense, and our team continues to shoot as planned, even though it's incredibly awkward. Most of our plans fall through because they start arguing. In front of a beautiful, solitary glacier. For 2 hours. Our team can hear them yelling at each other half a mile away because there's literally no one else around for miles. We finish up whatever we could of the last day of the shoot and awkwardly said our goodbyes. Later on, I learned they broke up a month before the wedding. Story 18. Boudoir photographer here. Quick if you didn't know, boudoir albums are a popular gift from brides to grooms. The experience and resulting photos are typically a huge ego boost for the bride and a cherished bonus for the groom. Typically, we have a professional hairstylist and makeup artist on site to really glam up the bride. Most clients bring a friend, and we encourage this for their comfort. Relaxed, happy people make the best photos, after all. Green flags. The day goes smoothly, and they're eager to buy an album afterwards, and we get a stellar review, and they go on to seemingly have a happy, healthy marriage. Bonus. We get emails or calls later from the groom expressing his fondness for the photos, thanking us for boosting her confidence, making her look gorgeous, etc. And now he wants a wall print. Neat. Red flags. If they spend the bulk of the time complaining with their friend about the groom's opinions and behavior, the relationship tends to fizzle out before the wedding. Worse yet, bride spends bulk of the time upset, texting her groom, or having arguments over the phone because he doesn't like the idea of someone else seeing her in her underwear and is sabotaging the shoot from afar. If a bride has ugly cried doing a boudoir shoot arguing with her husband-to-be, 9 out of 10, that marriage doesn't happen. Next scenario. Instead of just a trusted friend, sometimes the bride will bring the groom to the shoot. This itself isn't uncommon. Sometimes the groom is genuinely her best friend and everything is smooth. Green flags. She feels comfortable. It's easier to get her laughing and smiling, and he can make requests such as, "Do that look you gave me at the Taco Bell last week," and they get to work in inside jokes and fun things for their memories. Red flags with a specific horrifying story. Groom is a jealous, possessive, controlling a-hole who tries to run the photo shoot. We had a guy come in and start choosing her clothing, argued with the hairstylist, and added his own tips to every pose I set up. He spent more time criticizing her than actually being helpful. And then, so we get the little bottles of wine, like you'd find in a minibar, and offer one to the client to help with nerves. But only one. We don't want a drunk model, obviously. On this occasion, the bride politely declined the wine and said she was fine. The groom, however, happily took one. When the staff wasn't watching him, he'd grab another one from the fridge and down it like a shot. We later counted that he had 12 of them, becoming more of an a-hole with every gulp. He was sitting on the far side of the room, out of frame, and belting his suggestions at her the entire time, laughing at his own choice of words most of the time. Early on, I thought they just enjoyed playfully insulting each other, but this guy took it way too far. He said things like, "Arch your back more," "Put your ass down, you look like a porno," and "I kid you not, raise your face, I see your double chin." We finally had to stop the shoot early when he physically tried to take the camera away from me. Me: "Sir, I'm happy to show you the images, but please don't grab my camera. It's $3,000, and I'm sure you don't want that on the bill." Him: "I gotta make sure you didn't see her cooter." Me: "You can't see?" Shows him. Him: "Well, I did. I was staring right at it when you snapped the pic." Me: "You were also way over there." Him: "How do you know I didn't see it?" Me: shows him the last few photos. Because A, I'm over here, and B, if something shows in the photos that you're uncomfortable with, we can edit the crop or the shadows to hide sensitive content. Him: "I don't appreciate you trying to see my lady naked." Me: "Sir, she's naked. I'm trying to make some artwork for you." Him: "Give me that camera." I took a big step back as he lunged, and he tripped over an ottoman, cussing. I think we're done here. I stepped off to the side of the studio and asked the stylist to help the client get dressed/packed. She was in tears. The a-hole stepped out for a smoke while she got packed, and the bride, crying, apologized profusely for bringing him. She told me they had had arguments leading up to the photo shoot, and he insisted on being the person she brought. She agreed and decided then that their future hinged on his behavior, and he totally blew it. As other posts have more articulately pointed out, you can tell a whole lot about a relationship by how they interact with each other. Thankfully, the horror stories are rare. Story 19. Not a wedding photographer or anything of the sort, but my dad would tell me this story about the time they helped my uncle plan his first wedding. The one consistent red flag my dad noticed was how sneaky and distant the bride-to-be was, especially as the wedding grew closer. And at a barbecue a few weeks before the big day, she was a little too close for comfort with their next-door neighbor. My dad saw this and tried to warn my uncle, but he ignored it. Fast forward about 4 years, they have 2 daughters, and the wife is caught sleeping with the neighbor, which she had been doing the whole time. I've never met the woman because all this went down way before I was born, but apparently she was also incredibly rude to my family, especially my dad. So yeah, if your significant other is rude to your family, distant, and likes your neighbor a little too much, they're probably not the best partner for you. Story 20. Longtime wedding photographer here. I've been in the business long enough to have seen a few of my couples get divorced, so yes, there is a sixth sense. One common red flag was the groom's attitude toward the whole wedding. If it was just about getting plastered with his buddies, that's a huge red flag. But even some of the ones who I thought were really sweet and into each other ended in divorce. I think with some you can never tell, but with others it's plainly obvious that their marriage was a train wreck from the beginning. I think another red flag is if the bride constantly went back to her parents to consult or complain about challenges or issues that popped up instead of talking about it with her groom. It was a bad sign. It's possible that couples who do this can change, but it has always been a red flag if either of them is too attached to mom and dad's fixing their problems rather than working on it with each other. Other red flags. The wedding where the bride's dad brought a shotgun to the wedding. Divorced. If either of the couples looks down on the other one, pretty much doomed. Have kids together before marriage? Divorced. Vastly incompatible religious views? Divorced. Most military weddings I've shot? Divorced. Second or third marriages? Higher than average divorces. Married really young. Surprisingly not as big a factor as you'd think. Many are still together. Story 21. Not a photographer, but I got married last year and we ran into an issue on our wedding day that totally affirmed that I'd made the right decision in marrying my husband. Our wedding day was hot, 98 degrees with 70% humidity, and both our wedding and reception were outside. I was wearing my multi-layered dress for hours and I was miserable. About 2 hours into the reception, I realized how hot I was. I was soaked. I was shaking. I started to feel like I was going to faint. My husband took me to the changing room, which was air-conditioned, and suggested that I take my dress off, which I didn't want to do because it was my wedding dress, and we hadn't finished the photos. But as soon as he said it, I realized nothing sounded better. I couldn't wait to get that damn dress off, so he helped me. I commenced having a huge panic attack, the worst I've ever had. Keep in mind that our vows were over. It was just the heat and pressure of the reception stressing me out. My husband stayed with me and comforted me, and made me feel better when I didn't want to put my dress back on. I ended up wearing my sister's bridesmaid's dress for the rest of the day. I was worried that our photographer was going to be mad about not finishing the photos. He was a bit high-strung and not entirely nice. My husband merely said, "Don't worry, babe, I'll deal with it." And he went and explained that there would be no more photos. Just the way he handled the whole situation on literally the most stressful day of our lives was so impressive and reminded me of why I was marrying him. Edit. Funnily enough, our photographer did manage to capture the moment I thought I was about to hit the floor at my own wedding. Here's me feeling terrible, and my husband cluing into the fact that I didn't feel well. Story 22. Party bus driver for almost 5 years. Often we would do the bachelorette and the wedding party. All too often we'd get a combined bachelor/bachelorette party, and those were the worst. 90% of the time, it was the super controlling bride who didn't want the groom out on his own with his boys. When I was the office manager, I really tried to discourage this, as it seldom ended well. There would almost always be fighting and drama. We had a handful of ladies that we'd done 2 wedding buses for. Men, if your lady won't let you have a bachelor party but wants her bachelorette party, that's an enormous red flag. Story 23. Not a photographer, but I taught hundreds of couples their first wedding dance. I totally knew whose marriages would thrive and which couples would crash and burn, and by what year into the marriage, too. By working one-on-one with them over a period of months, it becomes crystal clear to anyone around, too. Couples who, when learning together a new skill, regardless of talent towards that new skill, complement each other when one of them achieves something that the other did not, are going to make it in life. Couples who would pass blame onto one another when challenged to acquire a new skill always put my divorce spidey senses up. Couples who love to argue and bicker like it was a sport, however, are going to make it together in life because some people just totally get off on it, and you can tell when you ask them mid-argument if everything is okay, and they instantly smile, and usually the non-dominant partner says something like, "Oh, yes, we're fine. Sorry, you should hate to hear us at a restaurant." Couples that way are too different from one another, but it's crystal clear that they love each other very much and will make it until the kids leave. Then it'll just be them and then divorce. Couples that don't look each other in the eye or have trouble with maintaining eye contact past 5 seconds. I give them 5 years tops. Story 24. Financial planners are also a part of this mix. I'd strongly encourage anyone planning on getting married to talk with a financial planner. The questions they ask impact many emotional points in a marriage that people are hesitant to discuss. How much does each partner earn? How much debt does each partner have? What assets does each partner have? How much will the finances be commingled? How much does each partner spend each month on consumer goods? Is the other partner okay with that number? How much do you like to travel? How? Where? How long? Style? Do you want to have kids? How many? When? Kids' education. Public? Private? What about college? If both partners work, who will take care of the kids? How? Do you want to have a house? What kind? Where? What kind of cars do you want to own? How often do you like to trade up? What age would you like to retire? Will you need to financially support any parents in their old age? A good financial planner will ask all those questions and many more. It can be pretty eye-opening for people. In conversations with my financial planner friend, he'll tell you these conversations often don't go well in his office. If you want to retire at 65, you're not going to be able to spend $200 per month on shoes. If you want 2 kids, you can't golf every weekend. Story 25. Oh, a question I can answer. The best wedding I ever saw, the groom really liked donuts, so their reception had a giant donut wall and it was so cool. The bride and groom just seemed to exude happiness. You could see the genuine love, respect, and joy in their eyes. I knew they were going to make it. Weirdest one I saw wasn't anything major, but the bride just didn't seem to care. Maybe she was simply a really laid-back person, but my job was to follow her for the day, and she was doing so much nothing that I texted my boss and took an early lunch. Returned for the ceremony. I can usually also tell by the friend group how happy the couple's going to be when I see them together. The ones whose friends are so happy to be there with them on that day, they're the ones with big smiles the whole time. And it's said a lot, but it's true. The more expensive weddings are usually less fun and a lot more stressful. Story 26. I'm a wedding photographer with 200 plus weddings of experience, and I actually have been really surprised by the couples who split up. We know approximately 6 couples who didn't stay together, and all of them seemed so in love on their wedding days. My most surprising one is a couple that couldn't be more obsessed with each other on their wedding day. Been together nearly a decade, most passionate vows I've ever heard, but divorced 3 months later. There are couples who I remember thinking on their wedding day that they didn't really seem that in love, but they're happily married years later. There are definitely red flags and green flags, but sometimes it's not the big, in-your-face stuff. We usually find out because we stay friends with them on social media or they contact us regarding what to do with their photos. Story 27. Wedding photographer here. Was shooting pictures at the registrar for a couple whose reception I shot. Registrar says, "So you both consent in a healthy state of mind in your own free will to get married, and these are your witnesses." Dude, groom, goes on full lockdown, and the bride, I knew her from my school. She was my senior and one of the notorious types even then. Not the brightest bulb either. 2. So the registrar laughs it off and asks the same thing in the local language. They both go, yes. The thing wasn't that they weren't well read or given better opportunities to learn. Crap, I went to the same school as the bride and turned out fine. And neither that they were poor or something, because she's from a pretty well-off family and the dude's mother basically had more gold on her than the bride did. In the entirety of the 3 days I'd spent photographing them, I'd never realized until then, gee, these two aren't stupid in love. These two are just stupid. You don't need a sixth sense to tell that it's not going to last long, because someday one of these two is going to be smarter than the other, and it'll be too much for either of them to handle. Yikes. Had a good laugh about it at the shop later. Feel bad for them though. Story 28. Recovering wedding photographer here. You get to see a lot of the relationship dynamic throughout the planning process. There are couples that obviously value each other's input and work hard to avoid being a caricature, and others where the bride/groom is more of an accessory to the event than an active part of it. One of the simplest indicators I've seen is how much time do they spend together during the reception. If they're each off with their own respective groups of friends/relatives for the majority of the reception, that's a red flag for me. So far, every time I've noticed this, I've heard about a divorce down the road. Edit. How could I forget that one time they got in an argument at the reception and were talking about divorce because the groom got too drunk? Kind of a red flag for sure. You know, I always wondered what the allure was with people that just get plastered drunk at their own wedding. Like, isn't that supposed to be a night that you want to remember for the rest of your life and not black it out entirely and act obnoxious and potentially say or do something that's going to compromise the relationship moving forward? I just never got that. Definitely have a drink or two, but to the people that just get sloshed at their weddings, answer in the comments why, and if so, are you still married? Story 29. Full-time wedding photographer here. About 300 over the past 15 years. It's odd because I get into this flow state and all these small moments are what I'm focusing on and working at capturing. I feel like I can pick up super subtle emotions and tiny details most people aren't paying attention to, since I'm extremely focused on the couple and their immediate friends/family during an oftentimes super stressful and expensive day. I found in these little moments is where you can see larger problems with the couple, like small moments of annoyance or frustration that are probably deeper relationship issues. I've also noticed the couples who have a strong intermingled friend group usually seem to do better, and the couples who are paying for the wedding themselves also seem to be stronger partners. But there have been several times where I thought, dang, these guys are solid, and then a couple years later I'd see on Facebook that they're separated. Story 30. If you're getting married, here are a few things to remember from someone who's seen a lot of weddings. If you're not careful, your wedding can ruin your marriage. Contrary to what popular culture will have you believe, a wedding isn't open permission to be drunk and crass. It's a rite of passage. If you and your partner take it seriously, it can become the foundation of a new stage in your relationship. If you treat your wedding like a cheap carnival ride, you're likely to end up going home with one of the carnies. You can have a ton of fun without denigrating your spouse or the institution of marriage. It's hip to be too cool for commitment. The best marriages I've seen and watched grow are the ones where the individuals in them are totally into each other. This includes a few open marriages I'm aware of. They may have multiple partners, but the core couple is inseparable. Anger has no place on a wedding day. Stress is a part of it, yes, but if you're hating that person as you walk down the aisle, something I've seen more than once, you're in the wrong story. If your wedding is making you angry, you need to simplify. A long engagement helps. This is from personal experience. We took 2 years to plan. We broke everything down into steps, made the most of our decorations. My wife bought an inexpensive but beautiful gown and did her alterations, made her own veil, etc. Planning further out gives you flexibility on dates. And yes, book halls and church first, as far in advance as possible. Red flags. Grooms who take no part in any of the planning, and grooms who joke constantly about how much everything costs, or how ridiculous it is that they had to pay for a wedding at all. Vegas. Parents who try to influence the proceedings, or control elements of the day in a way the bride and groom dislike. How people treat the photographer is a huge indicator of how they treat people in a business relationship, or really anyone who works in the service industry, and that's a huge indicator of what they're like as a person. If they're rude to people they consider employees, photographers, waitstaff, cooks, etc., steer clear. They think of themselves as better than other people, and eventually they'll think of themselves as superior to you. Every bridezilla I've ever followed up on is divorced. It doesn't always happen fast, but it has happened in every case. I'm glad to say, though, that I haven't worked with many of those. A keg in the church parking lot. When the dude bros in the wedding party start drinking before the ceremony or immediately after, there's going to be ugly drama. When the bride and groom spend more time with their respective wedding parties and not much time talking to each other throughout the day, there's trouble in paradise. The more expensive the wedding, the less likely they're going to make it. An open bar. Any exes in the wedding party who used to date the bride or groom. In one case, there was a maid of honor who had dated the bride and groom back in the day, separately. She ended the reception a sweaty, crying mess, but that was after the bride and groom had left, so they didn't see her melt down. Chicken straws and inflatable chickens, aka private parts. Dollar dances with the bride. Groping of any kind, even if it's a wedding game. Green flags. Inexpensive backyard weddings. Laughter, especially under pressure. General physical affection, especially when no one seems to be looking. Hugs. I'll always remember a bride who hugged her husband and then adjusted his hairpiece and tie while laughing. It's a moment that's burned into my memory. Not mashing cake. No humiliation during the ceremony or reception. No mean-spirited pranks. Neither wedding party engaging strippers. Only one couple that I worked with that I thought was going to make it forever divorced, and in that case, it looks very amiable. They're friendly acquaintances of mine, that's how I got the job, and you can see that they co-parent and do holidays together with their kids, and are just generally happier now that they're with their new partners. In my view, weddings should be relatively simple. The more pageantry, the less people in question are thinking about each other. My wife and I had a mix of both elaborate and simple elements, and that really seemed to work. And that's a big change in me that my wife brought on. I wanted to have lots of surprise elements and theatrical happenings. She reminded me that she wanted to spend the day with me, not worrying about a production. Thankfully, she got through my thick skull. Next to the births of my children, my wedding day is absolutely the best day of my life. You only get to have 2 parties like it in a lifetime, and the second one you don't get to be there for. Make it a good one, take it to heart, and enjoy it. Story 31. I did a little wedding photography work, and one wedding I did was for an American couple. The bride was the epitome of bridezilla. Every photo was carefully orchestrated by her, and I had to just let her do her thing, and on top of that, she let her mom get in the way of every shot. My guess because she didn't want to pay for the shots. I felt bad for the groom because he looked like he was just dragged into the relationship. It was a hugely expensive wedding in a very expensive part of NZ. I got paid more than I should have ever been paid for that wedding, but it threw up a million red flags. Another one I did genuinely made me jealous of how happy the other couple were. The parents had set money aside for a wedding, but the couple used it to buy a cute little country cottage. The wedding was in their new home, with the back porch being where the bride and groom were wed. The groom's brothers worked on a mill and got these beautiful tree logs and cut them into pews for people to sit. The whole wedding was put together by everyone invited to the wedding. Potluck dinner, fairy lights, very, very simple but genuine. I really hope they're still going strong. They had the look of deep in love, and everyone around them wanted the couple to be happy together. That was a wedding I hope to have one day. Story 32. Wedding photographer. I've been doing it for about 5 years, /70 plus weddings, and so far none of my couples have gotten divorced. But I've had several clients call off their weddings. The pattern I've noticed there is, one of them is very unhappy to be involved. Person doesn't want to be at the contract meeting, get the engagement photos done, etc. It's very obvious that he or she doesn't want to be there and thinks it's a waste of time. One of them is a bit controlling, i.e. he does something goofy in a photo and she smacks him and tells him to cut it out, but in a "you're so stupid" kind of way, not a "I love you, idiot" kind of way. Those are the only red flags I've noticed, but I feel like those can be seen even from an outsider's perspective, not even from a wedding vendor. Story 33. Wedding photographer for 10 plus years, 160 or so weddings. Predictive dynamics. 1. Stress imbalances. Typically, one partner is more stressed on a wedding day than the other, but the further the distance between stress levels, the less of a chance I'd give them. Who's barking orders to family? Who's irritated the flowers are 5 minutes late? Who's annoyed the guy's vests are not quite the shade of gray they were supposed to be? If both fiancé and fiancée are equally stressed, that's well and good. If one is unable to be in the moment and seeing red, though, while the other is floating in the clouds, that's bad. When life stress hits in the weeks following the ceremony, we can almost hear the fights now. 2. Family intrusions. The over-involved mom, whose pick for bridesmaid dresses ended up trumping the bride's during planning. The brash sister who interrupts the bride during getting ready time. The partner-in-crime brother whose best man speech includes references to the groom sleeping around during his party years, and the groom is too busy laughing to notice his now-wife's mortification. The wedding whose not-so-secretly deceased matronly grandmother gets more references during speech time than bride and groom. Family is important, and a key aspect of any wedding is the bringing of 2, or sometimes more, families together. But family should always come second to a couple on wedding day, or else it predicts one or more voices getting drowned out in the years to come. Not a recipe for matrimonial bliss. 3. Offhanded comments. Sure, I'll have a swig. Just give me a mint. She'll freak if she knows I drank before the ceremony. Text his mom to bring it. Don't ask him. He'll forget to bring it like he forgets everything else. These sorts of comments on a wedding day betray the early onset of secrecy, bitterness, disrespect, but I see this all the time. 4. Reception isolation. Bride's on the dance floor all night with her girls while he's outside smoking cigars all night with his college buddies. No one expects that bride and groom to be inseparable on wedding day, but geez, sometimes it's like they already can't stand each other. 5. One is vastly more drunk than the other. The amount of alcohol consumed on wedding night itself has no predicative value so far as I can see, except when one partner is slurring and the other is on cleanup detail. Whatever level of inebriation is appropriate for the celebration, bride and groom should be on roughly the same journey. This night is about the two of you. If one won't remember how the night ended, it better be both. The implications for why this is are fairly obvious, so I'll move on. 6. Unemotional first looks. Not everyone is a crier, I understand, but I've seen some first looks where the couple seemed almost bored. Not a good sign. 7. Booty grinding with members of the opposite sex during dance time. A little raunchiness in the spirit of good times is quite common, but sometimes the level of flirtation is so shocking, I wonder if that dude and the bride are old flames, or maybe about to light one in the nearest bathroom stall. These are a few that come first to mind. I'm sorry, that last point number 7, was hilarious to me. Booty grinding with members of the opposite sex. Like, hey babe, I know we just got married, but I'm gonna let this chick just grind on my dong for a little bit. And, feel free to take my brother and, booty grind on him as well. Like, obviously they wouldn't have said this if it didn't really happen, but I just think it's a funny visual that kind of takes us out of the moment, but also shines light onto kind of the shady stuff that happens during some of these red flag weddings/marriages. So I apologize for losing my composure there. Let's move on. Story 34. Photographer here. Yeah, you can usually tell when something is wrong. We've done about 50 weddings at this point, and we have 3 people break up in those 50 that we know of so far. We are candid or photojournalistic style, so we don't make people fake smile. We've had 1 divorce and 2 people call off the wedding and break up. The divorce, you could tell something was wrong from the moment we sat down with him. She seemed really excited and happy. It seemed like he would rather be on fire than talking to us. We just figured he didn't like photos. During the engagement shoot, he would look away from her after kissing. He didn't want to lift her up, and he would rather talk about his job than how his wedding planning was going. They broke up 6 months after the wedding. The 2 people that called off their wedding were the same way. One of them was super happy and really into it, and the other one was absolutely in misery. You can tell when someone doesn't like PDA or uncomfortable having their photo taken, but for a few, there's no love. We've done a few engagement shoots with the weddings coming up this year. I almost guarantee they won't make it. I hope I'm wrong, but time will tell. Story 35. Retired, was high-end wedding photographer for over many decades. Firstly, I totally concur with the cake smash red flags. Fave story from my many years. Church HVAC system got fire in it while the girls were getting ready. Bride just wanted her and her girls to take fun pics with the firefighters. Then, after the ceremony, we stopped at an outdoor venue on the way to the reception to take photos. Very big wedding party. I wanted a few of the guys to football squat in the front, so it would not be some endless straight line. One guy offered, but he was the only guy in a kilt, so I laughingly told him he'd have to be careful. Fast forward a few days, when editing, I go in super close on the photo because I see something. Yep, a tiny sliver of a scrotum hanging down in all the bridal party photos. I died laughing. Honestly, you would have had to know it was there to see it. So, of course, I cropped just that part super big and printed it in a frame on a sheet of paper and wrote, thus answering the age-old question in a Celtic font. Mailed it to the bride and groom. They called me a few days later, laughing their heads off, and asked if I could please send another copy for them to mail to the guy. They were the best. Still see them every now and then. That was probably 15 years ago. They have 3 kids and still seem extremely happy. Story 36. Late to respond, so this will probably get buried. Ex-photographer and wedding planner. I had the couple hire my business partner and I to plan their wedding. Throughout the planning process, the groom was present, but pretty quiet. Mostly just, yes dear, and sure, if that's what you want. He was actually a really nice guy. The bride, on the other hand, was obsessed with the details. The colors of her wedding had to exactly match the label from their favorite bottle of wine. The centerpieces all had to be just so. She kept talking about how the resort they were staying at for their honeymoon was giving them a free gift. The kicker was, as the ceremony started, groom was at the altar. Bridesmaids had already walked down the aisle. She was about to start walking down the aisle solo. I don't remember why there wasn't a father figure walking her down. And the bride turns to my business partner and says, I think the band is playing a slightly different version of this song than I wanted. At that point in the day, most happy couples are so focused on each other that they barely notice the guests around them, let alone the music, because they're so wrapped up in the moment of getting married to their best friend and all. During the reception, the photographer, DJ, site coordinator, my business partner, and I all made guesses about how long the marriage would last. I think the longest guess was 5 years. Halfway through their honeymoon in Jamaica, the groom walked out and got his own room. They got the marriage annulled as soon as they were back in the States. They didn't even make it 2 weeks. Long story short, the bride was consumed with the wedding, not the marriage. That's usually a pretty good indication of how long it will last. The couples who are focused on the marriage, making the other person's wishes known, bringing in fun and memorable details that pertain to the relationships, etc., tend to last. Those who are focused on the production of the event tend to not stay together forever. Story 37. I work at a wedding venue and there's always a vibe in the building on the day of. Sometimes it's a very bad vibe and I know things aren't going to go well. We deal with so much family and behind the scenes stuff, so it's really easy to feel palpable tension in the air from bride and groom, as well as wedding party and family members. There was one couple in particular who we had some issues with leading up to the big day. Not uncommon, just some requests they made that we couldn't easily accommodate. For that reason, I was really hoping the wedding would go seamlessly. When I walked in that day, I just felt a bad energy in the air. All of my coworkers agreed. Groom's mom was nervous and worried the whole time. Bride and groom were both in remarkably bad moods, and the biggest red flag was when the groom's dad came in. The groom looked at him and said, "Hey, how are you?" The dad said, "Well, I'm here," with a shrug. The groom responded, "Yeah, I feel the same way." That's not the attitude you want on your wedding day. Story 38. I used to photograph weddings. I'm still a photographer, but I don't do weddings anymore. I'm in India. In my experience, all the ones I thought would end in divorce are still going strong, and the ones I thought would do well ended in divorce. The groom and his father wore sunglasses for the entire duration of the indoor nighttime wedding. It was odd, but I didn't think much of it. Divorce. Bride emailed me requesting images to be removed from my blog. I removed them. Great fun and beautiful wedding. What looked like a madly in love couple, big families, lots of hugs, and good camaraderie. Divorce. I've asked if they want images removed, but they're okay with it. Girl has restraining order against the guy. Controlling bride. Had issues with my images, not legit issues IMO, but then that's subjective. I didn't think they'd last more than a year. It's been 7 years and they're still married. I quit weddings because I couldn't handle the drama, the unprofessionalism, and the insane expectations. The money was great. Story 39. There's a kind of being in sync that solid couples have, and it's pretty obvious, even during something potentially stressful as a wedding. Green. If the cake cutting gets smashed in someone's face, that's kind of a dead ringer. Red. If the dress and the rings or the wedding itself is a great personal expense, that's usually pretty rough to overcome, and you can usually see one of them stressing about it. Red. Ditto if it's a destination wedding or they explicitly ask for absurd gifts/cash. Red. If one of them gets trashed and disappears. Red. If crap goes sideways and they still laugh. Green. If they have a big, dumb dog they involve in the wedding. Green. If there are a lot of spoiled kids running around. Red. Unless the couple is the chill outlier in the family and they invited everyone to be polite. Green. If the wedding party is happy/sullen equals green/red. If one of the colors chosen is blood red or black and they went crazy with it. Red. Unless they're pagan or goth. Green. If only one of them is vegan. Red. If they look at each other the most. Green. Former wedding caterer. Story 40. Well, not a photographer nor a videographer here, but I'll tell you my story. The photographers we contracted for our wedding were a married couple themselves. Each time we met them, they kept warning and reminding us that our deposit would be forfeited if the wedding didn't take place. We had already read and signed our contract, so we were well aware of the terms of agreement. That being said, my spidey sense kept telling me those two kept bringing this point up because they didn't think that we would make it to the altar. Their reminders weren't exactly just a professional courtesy either. It got to the point we both looked at each other and then looked at them directly in the eyes and told them, "We know!" Fast forward 2 years after our wedding, the photographer couple got divorced. We're still married 24 years later. Story 41. Green flag. The duo in question are laughing, sincerely, mind you, and when they share their vows, both were beginning to tear up with joy, and in the reception act humble yet overjoyed. There's an air of that deep passion that goes far beyond just a physical relationship. Red flag. Couples seem rigid, more focused on keeping up appearances than, enjoying their own wedding. During the reception, they'll usually talk to their friends and only meet each other for the cutting of the cake and the dance. Bonus red flags. Groom flirts with maids. Both get sloppy drunk at reception within the hour. The two act snippy with each other during reception. And of course, a fist fight between the groom and would-be father-in-law. Relationship didn't ask, but damn was their Facebook feed entertaining. Story 42. Wife and I have only done one wedding, and an anniversary photo shoot, and researched countless others to learn techniques. So take this with a whole shaker of salt. Green flag was when the groom went behind the bride's back and asked for a very specific and candid prank shot. Not 5 minutes after he ran off giggling about his plan, the bride came up and requested the same shot, but about him instead. On the anniversary one, we had a shot that was planned by the kids. They bought a smash cake intending to recreate the face smash from the wedding. The sheer rage in the wife's eyes when the husband went for the cake was amazing. She got there first and destroyed him with the cake. Only red flag we saw in person was the bridesmaid, fiance of one of the guests, was trying to run the show and bossing her fiance around like a bridezilla without even considering the bride's wishes. She's doomed, and he's gonna be lucky when it crashes and burns, as long as it's before they get married. Story 43. Not a photographer/videographer, but I have this weird sixth sense where I can read people and situations really well. Without trying to sound like a pompous ass, if I meet a couple, I can usually tell within about 40 minutes of knowing them if their relationship will A, result in marriage, B, long-term but no marriage, or C, break up and what will be the cause of the breakup/divorce if they're already married. It's to the point that some acquaintances of my friends have asked me to hang out with them and their SO to get a read on their relationship. It's honestly a blessing and a curse. I should really market myself as the relationship whisperer. I'm also really good at predicting how long a new hire will last at work, so much so that my boss now brings me in to most interviews. I'm assuming a lot of nervous brides are going to read this post, so I'll give some advice, and most of it should hopefully seem like common sense, but I've talked to people that have said, whoa, I've never thought of that. So, wedding-specific things I've noticed. 1. Yes, the cake smash power dynamic. See other posts. 2. The first dance. Choreographed dances aside, if a couple is genuinely having fun with the dance, if they're laughing and smiling and talking to each other and kissing and just lost in their own little world and ignoring everything around them, this is a really good sign. Now, this kind of seems like a duh. That's how the first dance should be, but I can't tell you how many times I've witnessed a different kind of first dance. If the couple takes the dance very seriously and spends the whole time doing some slow dance move and remains silent the whole time, this is a bad sign. If the groom does not want to do the first dance and doesn't care what the first song will be, that is a bad sign. If the bride is embarrassed and literally cuts the dance short and says, "That's enough, somebody else please come up and dance too," that is not a great sign. Take it in. Enjoy this one moment of the reception where it's basically just the two of you alone together to have a semi-private moment. 3. How often is the couple together during the reception? The reception is a crazy time. The married couple has to give some time to every person that attended the wedding and make them feel included and like they're happy they came to the wedding, even if it's your third cousin you haven't seen in 10 years. I've noticed the more time the couple spends together, the more likely the marriage will last. If they're holding hands and are just clearly a cohesive unit that night, it's a really good sign. Nothing is sadder than a drunk bride spending 40 minutes trying to unsuccessfully find her groom, resulting in her crying. I get personal space and needing some alone time, and yes, day of wedding day crap is stressful, but it is one day where everyone has come together to celebrate you two. If you can't spend that one night excitedly next to your spouse, or your spouse can't with you, you might want to reconsider. 3.5. If one member of the couple eats at the wedding and the other does not, bad sign. Side note, make sure you have a friend/family member/planner who is in charge of making sure the couple eats some of the meal. 4. If one of the spouses refuses to dance at the wedding at all, and the other spouse wants them to dance with them, but can't coax them out to the dance floor after their first dance, that is an incredibly bad sign. Look, I get it. Dancing is not for everyone, but again, this is one day where the whole event is to have fun and celebrate the couple. Dance to a couple of songs if your partner wants to dance with you. 5. If both members of the couple get just absolutely blackout drunk, or hell, if one of them gets blackout drunk, that's a bad sign. Have a drink to calm the nerves, sure, but not so much that you won't remember any part of the wedding day. 6. Is the wedding theme/little touches centric to the couple? Good sign. Or is it standard wedding package number 4? Bad sign. Most of the successful couples I know had a fairly simple wedding that still was clearly the wedding of that couple. This one isn't 100% foolproof. You can have generic wedding number 4 if that's your style. I've just noticed those marriages don't tend to last as long. Some things outside of the big day. 1. The wedding planning takes over everything and the couple doesn't truly think about what happens after the wedding. I think so many unsuccessful couples get caught up in planning the wedding that they forget that after the big day, they have to go back home to each other every day for the rest of their life, at least in traditional monogamous marriages. So I think you have to stop and legitimately ask yourself, am I going to be happy to come home to this person every day for the rest of my life, even if/when the honeymoon period wears off? 2. Are you planning something you don't love or care about just to have a big, beautiful wedding? Some of the unsuccessful marriages I've witnessed, the couple lost track of who they are and just planned the wedding because they were supposed to plan a wedding. If you're not excited about your wedding plans, you can change them. 3. Getting married because it's the next step. You should be happy and excited about getting married. If you're getting married because it's the next step, or because you have a child together, or because you don't know what else to do, or because all your other friends are doing it, or because you're fighting a lot and being married will fix that, I've got bad news for you. Okay, this post is a monster in its length. Story 44. I'm a wedding photographer, and one of the most interesting parts of the job is that I'm probably the person who's closest to the couple the entire day, with several times when it's just them and me, and my assistant. You learn a lot about a couple's relationship when you see the way they interact when they have a private moment on what is an incredibly stressful, exciting, and emotional day. The ones that you know are going to be fine are the ones who look to one another for support and comfort, and not as another source of stress. Quiet moments alone together are rare, and always a good indicator of this. It's also usually pretty telling when there's tension about how they appear in front of a camera, worrying about the other's pose or facial expression, for example, or how their partner is holding them or touching them and how that might appear. My best couples are the ones who really resonate with my style and trust me to not only pose them well, but also to know when to adjust them when they're in organic poses and situations, and when to shoot the moment and from what angle. Basically, it's important to me that the couple cares about their photos, but it's more important that they care more about their partner than they do what they think/worry the photos are going to look like. Story 45. Something I've noticed about all these comments I've read is one or both of the couple are getting married due to the perfect life and dream wedding they've imagined for themselves, instead of wanting to be with their partner. Almost all these red flags boil down to this right here. I think a good way to see whether your SO loves you would be to tell them you don't want a wedding and see their reaction. Some people will be okay with it, and some people will want to break up with unbelievable sadness in their eyes. When your SO goes apecrap, starts shouting at you, blames you, or is disappointed she won't be a bride, they will probably replace you within a year to find another Prince Charming to have that perfect wedding with. Story 46. I've played a fair few weddings as part of a band. A lot of them with a band I started for that purpose, so I got to meet the couple before the wedding. I haven't kept up with any of the couples, but I can tell you 100% which marriages would either result in divorce or the dude being miserable for most of his life. The big red flag is when the bride just completely steamrolls the planning, and he has zero input in anything, takes no interest in what music he wants on the day, and just generally treats him and his friends as a bit of an inconvenience. Now, there's a clear difference in seeing a dude who doesn't really care about minor details. He just wants a Guns N' Roses song, and he's happy to let wifey be able to take control and have her day. Usually in that situation, the wife will still try and involve him a bit, or make sure that they have that whiskey or beer that he likes, or something like that. And the difference really shows on the day. It's mostly in the body language, and it's so obvious once you spot it. It honestly breaks my heart to see dudes just being almost forced into things like this that they don't actually want. For what it's worth, I've never once seen a dude steamroll his wife with the particulars of the wedding. Story 47. Maybe a tad off topic, but back when I first started shooting, I did weddings. Shooting at the bride's house in the morning, I caught, on camera, her telling her father she couldn't leave him. Apparently, the couple were to move out of state the next day. The father tried his best to convince her it would be okay. He noticed me with the cam and asked me to go downstairs. I wasn't stalking. It was all very fast before I knew for sure what they were talking about. I went downstairs and had some snacks. 15 to 20 minutes later, the father comes down and tells me I can leave. The wedding was off. I called my partner who was getting B-roll at the venue and told him to pack up. That was the most awkward shoot I'd ever been on. Story 48. I'm not a wedding planner or photographer or anything like that. I just went to a wedding last year where I was shocked at the groom's behavior. He was a primary school teacher and had invited some female work colleagues to the wedding reception. That in itself is totally fine, except other guests told me that one colleague was particularly flirtatious with him, even though she was married herself. At this reception, the groom got ridiculously drunk and spent more time downing shots with his groomsmen and lifting this female colleague up in the air, grinding on her, letting her grind on him, touching her lips, etc., than he did actually dancing and talking with his new wife. It got to the point where I had to talk to my boyfriend at the time, one of the stag do-goers, and beg him to do something. The bride had ran out of the room with her mum crying at this point. The groomsmen cornered the groom and told him to down water and talk to her. They seemed like they kind of made up that evening, but the next day at breakfast, she had a face like a slapped ass. Needless to say, my now ex-boyfriend kept making excuses for his friend. That turned out to be red flags for his future behavior, as did this event turn out to be red flags for the bride. Less than a month later, they were separated and he was living in a shared house with strangers. She took her sister on their honeymoon. Story 49. Yes, former wedding photographer here. I stopped wanting to photograph weddings because I could always tell who would get divorced, and the photographer is not there to object to the union. The way the bride and groom treated each other told me everything. Red flags. The behavior before the ceremony. Do they lash out at their soon-to-be spouse over someone else's mistakes / little things that really don't matter? Life is full of stress. If someone can't focus on the whole point of the wedding, the person they're about to marry, it's a good indicator of what the marriage will be like. Wandering eyes. Where are the bride and groom looking while they're dancing with each other? Disrespect. I've seen a groom actually tell a bride she had bad breath in front of the whole bridal party. Also, throwing cake in someone's face who clearly doesn't want that. Engagement photos going poorly. I had a groom-to-be threaten to throw his bride-to-be into a lake because she changed her outfit twice during the shoot. He wasn't joking. He looked downright pissed at her. Good signs. Both looking into each other's eyes during the first dance and holding each other like they're the only person on the planet. Then doing that for the rest of the dances. Story 50. I was a wedding planner out of a photography studio, so I would see a couple for the year leading up to and then a year after the wedding for their pictures and prints and reprints. Signs your marriage isn't going to make it. The people who don't pick up their prints right away. The people who ask outright for monetary gifts, put a PayPal on their invite, or otherwise try to dictate what gifts they get, beyond having a registry. The people who plan the party more than they plan the marriage. The people who balk at taking marriage counseling sessions. The people who cake smash in their spouse's face. Grooms who openly talk about their bachelor party as their last dance. I mean the ones who joke just a bit too much. The people who are on their third marriage. I actually don't have any thrice divorced couples who made it past a few months. Story 51. I'm not a photographer / videographer, but when me and my husband got married, we'd said to people that the only kids we were having there were family. One of my husband's friends brought their kids, but we shrugged it off, paid the extra for 2 kids' meals, and carried on with the day. Next thing, there's a load of sobbing, and the mother runs up to us in tears, screaming that she's sorry, and she's going to take the whole family home. We told her it was fine, we'd already paid for the meals, and not to worry about it. Now, bear in mind, an adult meal was 75 euros, and the kids were 25 euros, so we paid the 150 for her and her husband, and then added 50 for her kids. We could afford it at the time though, so no biggie. We didn't tell her the cost, just that it was sorted and asked her not to leave. She had a tantrum in the middle of the photos and went home, leaving her husband and kids. Our photographer said to us, the people who stay together are the ones who can deal with this kind of stuff. The ones who split are, well, them. Lo and behold, 6 months later, they got divorced. Me and my husband are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this winter. Photographers always know. Story 52. I have no specifics, mostly because I do so many that they all blend together, and I don't ever see the couple after the wedding. But to be honest, vows are the biggest specific green flag I can think of. When a couple has clearly made personal vows to their fiancé, it definitely stands out. Vows about what they hope to do together, how they plan to navigate the relationship. Those things stand out. A lot of vows are honestly very boilerplate. Not in a negative way, but try to speak of more than just your feelings. Overall, most weddings are very similar. When a couple has clearly chosen to do something unique with their wedding day, specifically because that uniqueness has special meaning to them, it's a pretty good indication. Also, if I can quote Star Wars in the presence of each individually, and they both get the references, they're probably gonna do just fine. Story 53. This could be the gist of a cheesy rom-com. Photographer has an almost supernatural and impeccable psychic ability to predict marriages that will flop. Then, he or she falls in love with someone whose marriage he or she predicts will flop. Yet, as the photographer starts to pursue the object of his or her desire, things go awry, and the photographer, although he or she weasels his or her way into the life of the couple, starts to get frustrated that feelings remain unreturned while the OG couple only grows closer and closer. The photographer then visits a modern-day mystic a la Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost to ask why things aren't working out, and she's equally as confused. They both scheme up a plan to hurry fate because, after all, the photographer has never been wrong. Then, the spouse the photographer is competing with does something dramatic to nearly end the marriage, but not as rash as the photographer's antics in his or her attempt to hurry the inevitable. The married couple then realizes how much they were meant for each other as a consequence of the photographer's misstep, and the movie ends with Whoopi mumbling something about tempting fate. Finite. Story 54. We lived with my in-laws for a while. The first few months, I tried so hard to like them. I really did. But there was one day where the mom, my husband no longer speaks to them for these same reasons, asked me to go grocery shopping with her. I agreed, as we usually had a lot of fun when we go do things together, so I was quite happy about it. We get about halfway to the store we were going to. It was another town, even though this store had a location quite close to our house, but I didn't question it since she claimed they had better sales and deals. And she says she has an extra errand she had to run, and I wasn't allowed to say anything to anyone. Thought it was weird, but again, thought maybe she was surprising me or the rest of the family because she had done this before. Anyways, we pull up to a random park and I start to get out with her, and she begins shouting that I need to stay in the goddamn car very aggressively. She then scurries off into some bushes where I guess she thought I couldn't hear her. I could though, and there was a man waiting for her. I literally sat in the car and waited for her to basically bang the dude for some meth before we went grocery shopping. Oh, and it gets worse, people. The cops being called on her, and the dad and their 2 daughters, who were all meth heads by the way, were a very common occurrence. They were known in the neighborhood for breaking and entering, property damage, they destroyed an empty house for the copper wiring, and assault. I had to talk to cops and basically talk them out of arresting people, and sometimes into arresting people, at least once a week. We stayed there for nearly 2 years. Why? Both sisters had kids, and I felt awful leaving them with people like that. You would think a mom would get up, feed, bathe, dress her kids, and take them to school. Nope, I was doing all that on top of trying to get myself ready for work every day, or to just leave in general. My husband was extremely depressed and wouldn't leave his room. There was one time the younger sister had just had a new baby, was home from the hospital less than 48 hours, and left the baby laying on the couch screaming. So I took care of it for 3 days instead of going to work because she didn't come back. I lost my job because of these people, and all the sister said was, "Oh, okay." That was the final straw for me. Seeing as how we weren't yet married, I told my husband I was moving. The relationship could end or he could come with me, but I would no longer be associated with that family. Luckily, he chose to get out with me. I told him he didn't have to stop talking to them, but never bring them to our home or tell them where we live. He said it's better to leave them behind, so we just did that. Don't worry, the kids were taken away by DCFS not long after we moved out. It's an interesting story, but what does that have to do with the topic at hand and the question that was asked about, red or green flags in weddings that you can kind of use to predict how the marriage is going to go? I don't know. That was just kind of weird. Anyway, let's go on. Story 55. Videographer here. Red flag 1. Overbearing parents of the bride and groom trying to control the wedding. Depending on how the son or daughter, bride or groom, react to this behavior will tell you if they'll end up divorced, just like their single parent, controlling every detail of the wedding, or will become a decent human who doesn't yell at a videographer to get them something when it is in no way my job. Red flag 2. Throwing up. But not like the nervous throwing up, because they're getting married, but like the stressed out for nothing kind of throwing up and overreacting. The many snaps the bride has on the groom or her family during pictures, careless about anything but looking good. Green flag 1. They don't really give a crap about the wedding and they're there to have fun. You may find them sneaking off somewhere, just loving being together. Green flag 2. They shove cake in each other's face. It means they don't take life seriously and they love each other and laugh at the mistakes. Less people do that than you would think. Story 56. ITT. 100 Reasons to Never Have a Wedding. The entire practice should be done away with. It's basically a huge celebration of narcissism that evolved from a village custom of everyone witnessing a marriage and then holding a party. Now it's become a girl's chance to be a special princess, and she's more interested in the wedding than marriage, and men just let themselves be pushed into it because it is the traditional, socially deemed process through which a relationship flows. So much bullcrap comes out of weddings. My wife and I have spent decades regretting having had one ourselves. If we had invested that money in the stock market, we would be incredibly wealthy now. We recently looked at our photos. We can't remember half of the people. A lot of them are long dead. Couples are divorced, innocent jokes at the time now revealed to be dysfunctional social behavior and obvious red flags. There's only a few people in that wedding photo we still talk to. We spent thousands entertaining people we cared nothing about so we could dress up in uncomfortable clothing and be photographed for hours, not looking our best. Just skip the wedding. You don't need a wedding. Use the money to hold a nice party and start your lives together. Rent, car, clothes, etc. Story 57. Well, they're not divorced, but it's headed somewhere ugly and fast. They were a dream couple on the day from a photographer's point of view. So lovely, fun, attractive, affectionate, and cooperative with the portrait session that they were giving me dream photos, and as a photographer on the job with one chance to get it right, that's all you care about and all you see at the time. The groom was extremely respectful, polite, gentle, romantic, and nice. Bride was fun, cute, friendly, and full of smiles and laughter. Except with hindsight now, and with my photography rose-tinted glasses off, the bride was childish and they were actually really full of themselves. After the wedding, she started revealing a baffling and outright horrid persona to me. I was so confused as I finished the wedding on great terms with them and became quite chummy with each other, and it was just straight up unprovoked random nastiness with no need and absolutely no attempt to control herself. I'm not sure I should divulge all the stuff that proceeded after that in case someone connected recognizes it, but to summarize, she pulled further increasingly psycho behavior, false accusations on social media, and her previously uber-genteel husband became shockingly aggressive and horrid too, and contacted people in my personal life. I managed to fend them off each time with my contract, being extremely firm with them and threatening to end my services. They still need to order their album, if they continue to behave this way. Due to her ridiculous social media posts about me, I then find out from friends of friends of friends who work with groom and have seen the posts that the bride is incredibly childish and has systematically ruined every relationship in groom's work life in less than a year of being married with this exact behavior. Groom works in a highly professional, respected, and public career and has been left with all his bosses, colleagues, and assistants on bad terms with him, and there has been major changes in the workplace. I wouldn't be surprised if the same has been done with his personal relationships. They had a baby exactly 9 months after the wedding and have continued to look loved up and like lovely people on social media, but I fear for the groom and the whole marriage. Story 58. One of my female cousins used to job at this place where they specialize in bride stuff. They also have this crappy little photo corner with just one PC and a printer where you can design and print the invitations. One couple decided to go for the basement bargain prices for invitations and argued for 4 hours straight. They made one newbie cry, who had to handhold them through the creation process. And so my cousin took over and had to sit there right in the middle of their domestic dispute. She later told me that she didn't mind at all. She already knew that the partnership would fail because no wedding party that had ordered invitation letters/cards from them had ever lasted more than 3 years. They buy all the decoration crap there, and they're usually fine. They buy a dress and it's 50-50. They order a stack of custom-designed invitation cards and they're doomed. There was some hope with these two really nice and wholesome guys that wanted to adopt, but they fell short of the 3-year by a month. To be clear, you buy one of the stock designs that the studio offers and you're doomed. There was the possibility of bringing your own photos and editing it yourself, but it was like 5 people who put in the effort and said they were okay. I'm a guy and not that interested in the traditional church-going type of marriage, but I had this one evening with my cousin where we shared a bottle of wine and had this really long conversation to get each other up to speed on what was going on in each other's lives. It was pretty dope, but that was a while ago. She used to live with us for school, but now she's got a job, a husband, and a baby, second one on the way. I just really like to remember that night. Story 59. I used to be a wedding videographer, then wedding photo editor, then now in engagement rings. It's easy for me to think a couple won't last if someone is uptight about things being perfect, or is pushy or weird and the other isn't. Sometimes they get worked up or upset, but as long as the other person cares enough to pull them aside, see if they're okay, and can pull them out of their phase for even a second, that's something real. If one recognizes that the other is having a hard time, and cares enough to see their personality change from stress or whatever, that's a true relationship. It doesn't have to be all smiles. I did an Airbnb shoot recently in Japan with my now fiance, and I have extreme social anxiety. I didn't realize the group shoot would be packed since it was a Saturday. It was supposed to be capped at 5, but it was 12, and I started getting nervous. As I started to quietly shut down, I thought I was being rather subtle about it. I know it can come across as I'm a female dog or I'm disinterested to the photographer and others, but my boyfriend took me aside and asked me if it was all the people or if it was something else, and asked me what he could do. He couldn't pull me completely out of a panic attack, but he cared enough to recognize something has changed in me even though he was socializing and could have not noticed it at all. I realized then that on the other side, as a photographer or working with any couple, no one is perfect, and even if they come across as rude or whatever to me, it's really their opinion of each other that shines true, if they really know each other best. Story 60. I did a brief bout of videographing with my oldest brother when I was younger. He convinced mom and dad to get him a semi-expensive VHS video camera with the idea that he could do video recordings of weddings and the like, which we did together all of 3 or 4 times. He did 2 without me as I was attending school during those weddings. Either way, it was not a career we sought after, as we were both worn out by weddings after the one bridezilla we ended up working for. To me, most of the weddings were solid and the couples were happy and low stress because they understood one key fact. The wedding ceremony is just that. It's a ceremony. It's not where you're actually married. You're married as soon as the paperwork is filed, which most of them did well before the wedding, to stop any last-minute stupidity from one of the relatives. The ceremony is mostly just a fancy play for everyone else. As a result, the ones who stayed together didn't go out of their way to make it perfect. They didn't stress about things going wrong. They just wanted to show their union with everyone and celebrate it with everyone. The one bridezilla we did record was for one who exploded about the flower arrangements not being the right shade, cussed out the catering service for not having exactly the right number of cupcakes on the platter, despite the fact that cramming them all on the intended platter would have had them falling over the edges, and insulted or trash-talked about what all the non-bridesmaids were wearing to said bridesmaids. She ended up divorcing her hubby about 2 to 3 months after the ceremony because he wasn't Mr. Right. Oh, and she also tried to stiff us when it came to paying the bill. Her mother ended up paying on her behalf. Story 61. Friend announced her engagement at a big party. Her fiancé, immediately following her announcement, told everyone without prompting that, quote, she wouldn't shut up about it, so why not? May as well at this point. Very uncomfortable for everyone. While doing the engagement shoot, she said the same thing, but added that she didn't really care to get married. During the entire shoot, she would berate him and micromanage him, then immediately turn towards me and smile her cheesiest, hardest smile. He was just trying to have fun the entire time, and it annoyed her to the point of visible anger. By the end of the shoot, him and I were so exhausted by her energy. She asked me to be in her wedding, and I gave a hard no. It ended our friendship, but I didn't really care. The way they treat each other disgusted me. They got married anyway and had their 4th baby. Yikes. Red flags. Body language. If they don't know how to move together, don't focus on each other. How they speak to each other in between poses. Worried about people-pleasing. Green flags. Respect, attentiveness, playfulness, need little direction. Make the day about them and their life together. Story 62. Yes and no. It's hard to judge the long-term success of a marriage by the events of a single day. As someone who's getting married later this month, planning is very stressful even when you have all the money you need. All the money in the world can't make people understand what you need them to do if they won't listen, or show up on time, or have a complex sequence of events fire off perfectly. Usually, people are hungover and irritable. Someone has almost always forgotten something important. They're always running behind, etc. Thus, the bride in particular is likely to be on edge to a degree. Some marriages have lasted, some haven't. I'd say it's 80-20 as to the ratio. Red flags would certainly be mass consumption of alcohol before the wedding, as well as a spouse that's buried in their phone most of the day. It speaks to that they're trying to escape the situation. Story 63. Wedding photographer here with 100 plus weddings under my belt. Maybe it's just me, but so far most of my couples have stayed together. I'm a very low-key / relaxed person, and I purposely don't take on brides or grooms who are high-strung. I'm assuming for that reason, most of the couples I photographed have worked through any problems. Red flag for one couple who actually broke up before the wedding. Bride was making somewhat uncomfortable jokes about her husband-to-be during their engagement session, while he was standing right there. I'm assuming she thought she was being funny, but it seemed like she was roasting her fiancé the entire session. I'm assuming to get him to lighten up for pictures. Not only did it make it awkward, but he didn't say anything to her to make her stop, which then caused them to argue after the pictures were over, and he looked miserable in every one of them. Some other red flags I've noticed. Brides or grooms who are obsessed with their online presence and need to post something about everything they're doing. This type of relationship actually works out if both of them are really into posting online though. But when it's just one of them, it seems to cause a lot of issues with the relationship. Another red flag. When a bride or groom drinks too much at the wedding, it seems to cause issues with the relationship and with family members at the wedding too. Overall, I've noticed that the couples who are relaxed and not stressed about the perfect day seem to handle issues when they do arise in the relationship. Story 64. Wedding photographer here. Red flags for typical weddings involve average white North American couples. Some of these simply don't apply to weddings in other cultures. Very young B and G, e.g. under 22 to 23. Bride and or MOB is making all decisions alone / without groom. Wedding has over 200 guests. Wedding party with more than 6 attendants per side. Bride in tears, not happy ones. Day of wedding. Bride more into the party aspect of the wedding than into her groom. Groom banging other person on wedding day. Yes, it's happened. Bar tab in excess of $5,000. Or conversely, wedding is not open bar. Multiple children from multiple ex-partners. Couple doesn't communicate well with me. Doesn't pay bills on time. Doesn't keep appointments. Keeping financial secrets from each other / making purchases the other isn't aware of. Has long list of Pinterest / Instagram shots they want to recreate in 20 minutes with a $2,000 photo budget. Okay, maybe that's just a pet peeve. But most of all, one or both of couple is rude to each other, their friends and families, and other vendors. Rudeness and disrespect over everything. Green flags. Makes decisions together. Confident in their relationship. Financially stable. Both employed. Have already lived together. Have mutual pets together. Notice things together that they want in their own life / are open with each other about aspirations, style, etc. Budget effectively and agree on how to prioritize their budget. Same religious / cultural priorities. Sixth sense? I think anyone who's been in the industry long enough develops a pretty good idea about what's going to work and what won't. In all the years, I've only called one wrong once, to the best of my knowledge. Some things come out of the blue still. Story 65. Former apprentice here. I worked with my company for about 3 to 4 years until I found a more lucrative summer job. I was a second shooter / assistant. Green flags. 1. When you ask them to kiss for photos and they won't stop after the fact. 2. When the groom is actually having a good time and is knocking back a few cold ones with his groomsmen. 3. When everyone is getting down and the couple are still out on the dance floor even towards the end of the reception. Red flags. Whenever you hear anybody go, ugh, during the shoot at the venue. 2. Whenever the bride / groom barks an order at one another during the wedding day. But by far, the best indicator is how they treat the vendors and workers. The best couples always made sure the photographers, DJs, videographers, and whatnot always had a table to sit down and enjoy dinner after what was on the contract was fulfilled. Story 66. Okay, first of all, get your facts right. I'm the bride you're talking about, and I didn't call off the wedding because of the groom booking a cheap hotel, even though he has all the money in the world and still lives. I called off the wedding because I didn't trust him to stand up for me ever. He constantly picked his parents and their crazy demands, like me showing them my college transcript, bank statement, over me to prove to them that I was worthy of their son. No girl and a bride deserves to go through such constant torment. I expected the guy to have some balls and stand up for me, but he kept on failing me, and that's the reason I called off the wedding a month before. It wasn't for some less than luxurious room, but the thought of me constantly trying to prove myself to his selfish parents that I was worthy of their son made me call it off. He obviously wasn't man enough to deserve me. Story 67. My best friend's wedding. It was a beautiful destination wedding, incredibly fun for all the guests, but awkward as F between groom and bride. The bride went from zero to bridezilla in milliseconds, blaming the groom for every single thing that wasn't perfect and calling the wedding off a couple times hours before the wedding, just going on with it at the end because of the social embarrassment that this would bring her and her family. So the ceremony was super sad. My friend would be looking for the rest of the night aimlessly with a "what the F have I done" look, extremely quiet and lonely. The bride would switch between only being with her friends and family and very obviously belittling him in front of everyone and screaming at him when he tried to be with his friends. The mega effed up thing is they're still together, 12 plus years later, even when she has cheated, constantly treated him like crap, she forbid him from getting together with his friends, and is just an absolute female dog. The only reason he's still with her is that he's afraid of losing his kid's custody. She continuously threatens him with this. He started going to therapy, so hopefully he'll finally follow our advice and start documenting all of the abuse, meet with a divorce lawyer, fight for his children's custody, and get the F out. Now, I'm assuming that they did not have children before getting married. I mean, it's certainly possible if they did beforehand, but it's like, if she was this terrible that early on, A, why'd you end up marrying her? B, why did you have kids? I mean, it is pluralized there, so why'd you have multiple children with this crazy woman that treats you like crap? That's a mess that you created, brother. You never should have gone down that road. I know I'm not in that situation, so it's easy for me to say, but just ostensibly from the outside looking in, why'd you even bother with that? Story 68. I asked my ex a few times why he would never post a picture of us. He said he believed that personal life should stay personal, which is why he deactivated his Facebook and wouldn't have our relationship status on there if he did have a Facebook. Well, Q, 1 week after he broke up with me, posted on Facebook he was in a relationship with this nasty-ass hoe. I'm not even making that up. She's had 5 relationships in the past 2 years and was flirting with my ex while we were together. When he first met her, he even told her she was a hoe and doesn't want to be her friend and would hide from her at work, and started posting pictures of them on Instagram all the time. Even posted a picture of them together saying, "never been happier," which is the same caption I had on a picture of us. Anyways, he did all of this just to rub it in my face because he knew I wanted him to post something of us since I did 3 times during our relationship. I'm very insecure and thought he was embarrassed to be with me. Turns out he's just a cheating piece of crap that will only do things if it benefits him. How did it benefit him? He convinced that hoe he loves her and he would post pics to keep her around so they could move in together literally the night they started dating so he could get off his dad's couch. They now have their own apartment, with only him working because she quit her job because she couldn't handle my drama, even though she was the one causing all the drama. Now she's jobless. All the pressure is on him to pay rent and her bills and their collective bills. He's under stress, and they've already almost broken up once. So yeah, long story short, couples post more frequently about each other when they have problems to make everything seem all perfect and happy. Also, I'm living for the day they break up so I can rub it in her face. Within 1 week of them dating, she was messaging me saying how he loves her and how they're going to get married, lol. Story 69. My first wife and I were high school sweethearts and best friends. We bickered all the time, but hardly ever actually fought. Once, some friends we'd invited to a bonfire asked us to please stop fighting. We looked at each other, puzzled, started laughing, and said in unison, "We're not fighting." Sometimes people just love to flip each other crap all the time. We did learn to tone it back around our friends, though. It's been 18 years since she passed, and not a day goes by I don't think of her. Story 70. Yes, this is the Undying love post. My second most hated type of Facebook post, only behind the humble brag. I have a few Facebook friends that do this. I don't really know how their marriages are, but one could only wonder if they're trying to make up for something. It's like the posts of someone you know that has no money, yet posts every single purchase, from new phone to new car, and accompany it by some lame story about their newly acquired purchase, a story of how they decided to buy it, how they plan to use it, and how awesome it is. In reality, you know they can't really afford what they bought. What they bought is some mass-produced product that no one really cares about, and to most, they just come off as a douche. I mean, I love my wife and my wife loves me. On our birthdays, anniversaries, and other occasions, I've never thought it would be necessary to post about my undying love for my wife. We tell each other probably every day we love each other, in private and in public. I just don't understand the thought process behind it. I imagine something like, okay, I've been crappy to her, so I better let everyone see I said I love her in case she tries to leave me. If I post something this good, everyone will think it's her fault. Story 71. My wedding went wonderfully off the rails at the start. The groomsmen didn't come over to help me get ready, which my wife and I expected. My wife reminded me to find something that had gone missing, but in the process, I forgot her ring. We passed my ring back and forth. Hilarious for both of us, and not the ha 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 I'm going to kill you way. I mean, we still laugh about it. We looked like idiots while dancing and barely gave a damn, and the tossing of the bouquet didn't go as planned. We used fake flowers since my wife is allergic, and instead of tossing them over her shoulder, she whipped them back and beamed one of the bridesmaids in the face. Fun times. Still married, by the way. Story 72. This is 100% my sister. She got married to a man she knew for 3 months. She treats her own family terrible in real life, but say I watch her kid, I'm the best sister ever on social media. Her husband has sadly learned that she's psycho and goes from 0 to 1 million in a second. And this is actually the first guy she's ever dated that I've actually liked. She controls every little aspect of his life, including telling him when he can play Xbox or when and what he can eat. My nephew has told me that her husband will cry a lot because of how psycho she is. Husband wants to go to a marriage counselor and she won't. They've officially known each other for 13 months. Edited. To add that in the best sis ever on social media, she portrays the perfect life online, but far from the truth in real life. Story 73. I suppose it's just a small thing which displays whether he's empathetic, caring, and respects boundaries. Violating your wishes on that respect shows he's none of those, because he didn't stop to think about how it would make you feel, which is either because he's clueless about the fact other people have feelings to start with, or it just means that he cares about other things. E.g., getting a laugh more than he does about upsetting you, so I would expect these problems to have come up in other areas of the relationship. And I also think little or subtle boundary encroachments like this are extremely telling because they tell you that a person has poor respect for boundaries in general and will usually push every kind of boundary they can eventually just because it irks them that other people have them. Story 74. My partner was upfront with me and said he would absolutely hate it if I tried to smash a cake on his face. I didn't really care one way or another, so we agreed to cut it together, then nicely feed each other a little piece. It helped that we had 2 different small cakes, one gluten-free and one glutinous. Coming up on 9 years of marriage this summer, and it's 100% because I didn't mush pastry all over his face. Edit. Wow, my brain did something very weird when I was writing this comment. We're coming up on 5 years of marriage, and we've been together over 9 years. We celebrate when we first got together more than our wedding, so I sometimes conflate the timing. Story 75. I can totally see how this moment would be really telling. We had agreed not to do this prior to the wedding, but by the time we got around to cutting the cake, I had had more than a few drinks and I thought it would be hilarious. He made it very clear he would be very unhappy with that, and there's some pretty funny photos of us having a laugh about it, coupled with very intense eye contact where he's clearly trying to communicate with drunk me without making a scene. There's one especially funny photo of him holding the knife, me holding a piece of cake, and him laughing and looking a little exasperated with me. I'm so glad I didn't do the cake smush because I know how angry he would have been. But the photo is so funny, and it was a really funny and lighthearted moment overall. Story 76. Interesting you brought this up. At our wedding 15 years ago, my husband thought it would be fun to shove cake in my face, up my nose, smearing my glasses, etc. I explicitly told him not to. I reiterated this fact multiple times. I was very clear. Do not shove cake in my face. That mother effer did it anyway. I was mortified. I was pissed. I was humiliated. To this day, he still thinks it's funny as crap, and I get pissed off that he didn't respect my wishes that day. However, we are very happily married. We will celebrate 16 years this fall. Been together 18. Maybe we're not the norm, but that one incident across years of marriage does not define us, nor did it deter us from making this work. I'm still very much in love with my husband, although at times I don't like him very much. He would say the same about me, and that's okay. Guys out there, don't be an a-hole and smush your wife in the face with cake. It's not fun having icing up your nose. It burns, and it's sticky to clean up. Story 77. My mom is a full-time caterer/venue manager. She always seems to know when one of her couples get divorced. I think part of it stems from the emotional connection brides tend to form with their wedding staff. It's a very intense and important process to most people to plan a wedding, and sometimes by the end of it, my mom is almost like a second mother to these girls, especially the young ones, so those ones keep in touch. Also, most wedding staffers do other events too, so if you had a great caterer or photography at your wedding, you're likely to book them again for future events/parties. Story 78. On my wedding day, everything seemed to be going well. Hair and makeup done, friends around, lots of laughter, but all day my mom was MIA. I kept asking where she was, and people kept making excuses for why she wasn't there. By 2 hours before the wedding, I'm getting upset to the point of tears on why my mom has not been with me all day on one of the most important days of my life. Finally, one of my bridesmaids caves and tells me my florist never showed up with flowers, and when my mom arrived at the church 6 hours earlier to see how the flower arrangements looked, it was empty. No flowers, just candles we'd set up the day before. So my mom has been running all over 3 counties trying to buy flowers and decorate the church and put me a bouquet together. It still makes me cry thinking of what she was going through to make sure my day was special. I texted her, she would not answer my calls, and told her not to worry about flowers. I didn't care if the church was bare and I had no flowers to carry. I just wanted to share my day with her and marry the man I love. She called me sobbing and said she just wanted everything to be perfect for me. She showed up 30 minutes later and I did her hair and makeup and made sure she felt beautiful because I know it's one of the biggest days of her life too. So things can definitely go wrong in a wedding, but if you remind yourself what the day is really about, the day can only be perfect. It was to me. Story 79. I've been to a few weddings and had 2 of my own. It's more about unnecessary stress already being added to a more stressful day. For instance, my friend spent a few $100s on a DJ. His wife spent hours picking out the full song list and the order things were being played. DJ confirmed this with her. My buddy's wife wanted to enter a specific song that was played at her parents' wedding. Day before ceremony, we all practiced without music. DJ showed her the music list and order. Everything was perfect. Day of wedding, the entire entrance set was out of order. He didn't have the song she specifically requested for her to enter. He announced their names wrong. Do you get a refund? Sure. Or at least a discounted price to pay? Sure. But in the moment it does suck, and then you couple that with the food being taken off the buffet, so some people never ate. The cake not being cut properly, so people aren't getting slices. All things that aren't a big deal, but when you're spending that much money, you put that pressure onto wanting it perfect. Story 80. I knew my wife was the right person for me before I asked her to marry me, but that was confirmed for me in spades on the week leading up to our wedding day. A week before the wedding, we spent an entire day out in the sun looking up at an air show without any sunscreen and without a hat. I ended up with a literal 2nd-degree burn on my forehead. It swelled up, got infected, the whole works. My forehead was a crusty mess. It looked horrific. The next night I woke up and couldn't see. My eyes had swelled shut. She had to drive me to the clinic at 2 a.m., where the nurse on call told us the honeymoon was definitely off and we'd probably have to postpone the wedding. I felt absolutely horrible that I'd ruined our big day. The on-call clinic doctor sent me to Walter Reed the next day, which was over an hour away. Instead of preparing for the wedding only a few days away, she now had to lead me around a hospital by the hand because I was practically blind. Her attitude didn't faze her at all. She told me it was only a day and that in the end we'd still be married regardless of what I looked like in the pictures. I then knew for sure that she'd have my back no matter what happened. The docs at Walter Reed worked a miracle, got the swelling down just in time, and loaded me up with antibiotics, salves, and bandages, ensuring we didn't miss our honeymoon either. My eyes returned to normal the morning of the wedding. The wedding photographer photoshopped most of the burns out, although I asked for the unretouched pictures so I could remember the day. And through it all, my wife didn't stress at all. We realized yesterday that we've been married for almost 7 years. It still feels like we just got married last year. Story 81. Our wedding was like a dream. We were both on cloud 9. We still have family members at holidays bring up how much they enjoyed our wedding. I made sure to tip the caterer/DJ/venue/photographer, etc. Also made sure everyone was fed. My sister said my husband and I seemed so calm and natural. My mom said she never knew I had such creativity in me. My dad told me how proud he was of me during the father-daughter dance. Everyone was having a good time. Pure magic. I think what really helped is my husband and I worked together. We didn't let others interfere with what we had in mind. In a couple months will be our 3-year wedding anniversary and 7 years total together. It's a tough journey sometimes, but we are still and always will be best friends that happen to be in love with each other. Story 82. My wife said no cake smushing, but I could tell she was thinking about it when the time came. I went first and she seemed a little angry. I think it was feigned. We both ended up with cake up the nose. Not nuclear or MOAB, but somewhat bunker buster. There was probably cleavage cake. No alcohol was involved. Well, just a sip from the toast. 25 years this year. Not a rocky marriage, as best I can tell. Maybe she's playing the long con. Story 83. I really wanted to do the cake smushing at my wedding, but my wife wasn't so sure. Mostly makeup reasons, like you mentioned. We ended up making a deal that my wife would be the one to initiate the cake smushing if she wanted to do it. But if she didn't do it at the wedding, I got to smear cake on her face once a year for the rest of our lives. Turns out she totally forgot about it until we cut the cake, and one of our close friends shouted, "Is she going to do it?" She paused for a second and then smushed cake in my face. We both love each other very much, and it's just a super fun thing to do. Plus, it's towards the end of the night, and most of the pictures have already been taken. Story 84. As a former caterer, I'd like to add the caveat that it's fairly rarely the couple that complains about dumb crap. They tend to be super focused on, getting married. It's always some random-ass relative who's taken the position of amateur wedding planner who decides to throw a fit over nothing. Even when there's something seriously wrong, the couple is 90% of the time pretty cool about it, but wedding planner relative makes it a mess. Like the one time there were 2 chairs missing from the head table, which is a fairly big deal since they all walked in and there was awkwardly nowhere for 2 bridesmaids to sit. I was the closest person, and the bride walked over and was like, "Hey, we need 2 chairs for the head table." I, of course, was like, "Oh, crap," and went to find chairs. Before I could get 3 steps, this older woman, who I believe was the bride's aunt, comes over and loses her effing mind. I was like, "Ma'am, I'm on my way to get the chairs right now." But she had to stand there and get snippy for 2 minutes, which just delayed me fixing the issue in the first place. Story 85. Had a wedding just 2 weeks ago. One of the bridesmaids was also a hairdresser, visiting and not working a wedding for once. She said this to us like 8 times. Anyways, I use a very strong finishing lacquer on all updos. It can be layered over stuff, but if another product is sprayed over it, it will get dull and flaky and not look good. Plus, I can't comb through it again. Well, when I had an updo setting with hairpins in it, I sent the gal that was setting off for a bit. The plan being that she would come back after the bride's done for a final spray and hairpin removal and final fluff, etc. Apparently, said hairdresser bridesmaid didn't think I knew what I was doing. She had taken it upon herself and shoved all the pins in and sprayed a different spray all over the hair. When the bridesmaid with setting hair sat down again, I asked what she'd done while she was waiting. She pointed at the other bridesmaid and said, "She told me the pins shouldn't stick out and it needed more spray or it wouldn't stay up all day." I took a deep breath and explained why I do it the way I do it, and that the pins only set the hair and are removed before I leave. I also showed the gal where her hair was flaking and getting dull because the 2 products shouldn't be mixed, and that there's not much I can do about that until it's washed. And we don't have time for that. And I can't comb it again either without making the flaking worse. Before I could say another word, the bride's mom went over to the bridesmaid, who had messed with my work, and said, "I watched how long that took funny miss to do to get it exactly right before she put those pin things in. She's the one we're paying. Do not touch anyone else's hair. If you wanted to work on hair today, you should have said so months ago." I breathed a sigh of relief, and the snarky hairdresser bridesmaid wasn't seen again, and touched no one else's hair. There's always one, I swear. Story 86. I went to a wedding where they had the groom's Mac top playing the bridal march, and I was asked literally last minute to man the computer and stop the music when the bride reached the altar. Okay, no problem, or so I thought. Well, the groom takes his place and the bride floats down the aisle, and I go for my hastily planned fade to cut DJing, only to find the screensaver has kicked on and it's password locked. The song has only been playing for a minute. Who has a minute screensaver? I would have just pulled the plug, but it was a laptop using Bluetooth speakers. There's nothing to pull. Who knows the password? Only the groom. He left his bride at the altar because of that bloody Mac. The rest of the wedding was nice, though. Story 87. Whenever I video, I try to get as much as the bride and groom dancing as possible. Usually, people make way for the camera as soon as they see it and are really nice. I'm filming this perfect shot of the bride. People are jumping in with her to dance, which is awesome. We want guests interacting like that. This one guy jumps in front of my camera, sticking his tongue out, and would not get out of my way. I step, he follows. Ruin the shot. Didn't even get him because he's so close and the focus was off. Accidentally caught another older man lasciviously groping a younger girl while dancing. Dressed hiked up and all. About the same time, a group of 4, 2 male, 2 female, definitely older than 40s, were dancing while doing the tongue waggling between 2 fingers gesture. My partner was filming and a lady kept pestering her. "You have to get this shot. Ooh, record that. Did you get enough of John Smith, who was of no importance, just a random guest? Ruined a couple of his good shots with her hands in the camera. And we always get guests saying their well wishes into the camera. Had one group yell that they wish they had a good time tonight with accompanying motions. They weren't referring to the reception. Story 88. The first wedding I ever went to, in 3rd grade, was an unthemed costume wedding. The bride and groom wore togas. I was a fairy princess, my brother was a clown, my mom was a witch, and my dad was a farmer. The officiant was dressed as a nun. It was maybe 30 people, and the couple didn't know that you need a permit to get married at the Lincoln Memorial. So when the cops came over to see who all the crazy people were, they said we had to leave when they found out it was a wedding. We went back to the groom's house to have the wedding in his yard. The couple started a food fight with the cake, then ripped each other's togas off and chased each other around the yard naked. There was also a piñata. I wrote about it in my school journal and got in trouble for drawing a naked lady. Anyway, that was almost 30 years ago and they're still together. Story 89. I went to a Discordian wedding where costumes were encouraged. It was in the middle of the woods and everyone brought a food dish to share. The bride had a sparkly prom-style dress and long braided hair. The groom was in his boxers and nothing else. The wedding party was dressed up like medieval warriors and were all taking shots of liquor during the ceremony. The person who officiated was in full robes with maleficent horns. After the ceremony, we lit sparklers, then carried on to the after party. There was a legal weed bar, and it was hands down the most relaxed wedding I've ever attended. Story 90. We did a dark fairy theme with our cardboard box decorated as a fairy stump and pin up fairy girls as the table numbers. Home-dipped caramel apples rolled in various goodness as the place cards. Everyone still talks about it 10 years later. My grandma, who worked as a secretary at a Catholic school for 30 years, even took some of the pinups afterwards. Not much to clean up afterwards. Families pretty much stole everything that wasn't nailed down. Centerpieces, other people's apples. Story 91. I had a Princess Bride themed wedding. We laughed. It was also costume themed as it was October 13th, Friday 2017. It was hilarious fun. No arguments, no cake smushing, though I would have been down. I said no for pictures. We got to dance to great music we picked as it was outdoors and we were our own DJ. Kept it simple, sweet, short, wrote our own vows. We both cried. We're filing for divorce this year because apparently her mistake was asking me to marry her. She cheated on me, has lied to me about nearly everything in our relationship, but I was too blind with love for her and her daughter to see. And she was the one to throw me out even after I forgave her and showed utmost willingness to work things out. No, I was made homeless, ripped from my family of 6.5 years. So silly weddings are not always the best signs. Story 92. I was 6.5 months pregnant when I got married and had hypermesis and wore a subcutaneous Zofran pump that I wore in a beautiful black fanny pack that was made for holding the pump specifically for the last 4 months of my pregnancy. I was sick throughout my whole wedding and ended up in the hospital that night with a kidney infection. I was sitting down the whole night trying to have fun and be happy, but felt like crap. My husband had fun and ended the night by cleaning my vomit out of the bathroom sink with his hands because for some reason I couldn't make it 4 feet to the toilet. Story 93. Not wedding related, but a tangential story. When I was 5, I had a flu. I was vomiting in the toilet, like I'd been taught, until one time I started to vomit while on the toilet. So I puked into the only other place I could in that tiny, tiny bathroom, the sink. I then went and told my dad what had happened, probably crying. I remember him telling me it was okay, I had done the right thing. Well, you know how kid logic works, right? I interpreted my father's message to mean not that I'd done the right thing in that particular situation, but that using the sink to vomit was always the right way to do it. I'd been doing it wrong my whole life. Well, never again, I thought. I diligently threw up into the sink as my flu continued, and my father, thinking I'd had no other choice each time, kept cleaning my bathroom sink. That sweet man. I think on day 2 or 3, he saw me throw up into the sink when the toilet was available. We had another discussion, where I learned that I'd misunderstood earlier. He was really nice about it, and probably relieved that he'd have less kid sink puke to clean in the future. Thanks, Dad. Story 94. As a wedding planner, when clients are writing their own vows to be shared for the first time on the wedding day, I always recommend that they have a third party look them over at least a few days before. Too often I've seen one spouse go light and funny with it, i.e., I promise to not get mad when you forget to fold the laundry, and the other one sincerely pour out their heart and soul, and it's super awkward. Or sometimes one person's is way longer than the others, and that's weird too. Bottom line, have someone you both trust read over the vows ahead of time and help you make edits so they have a similar vibe. Story 95. I'm a florist, so I mainly deal with people ahead of time, not day of, thank goodness. And oftentimes I'm just dealing with the bride and sometimes mother of the bride. Totally agree about the being kind to the loved ones part. Sometimes you get a bride being so rude to their mother, it's deeply uncomfortable and embarrassing to witness. Always makes me think the bride is a spoiled brat and a bad person, and makes me pity the groom. I've noticed the really awful ones tend to get the worst weather, lol. Here's a very strange, sad thing that occurred with one bride that was an utter tyrant, and just terrible to deal with. She literally made the decor person cry, and was measuring the bows and the chair backs on her own wedding day. Anyways, a year or two after the wedding, there was a story in the news of a young mother who went missing, and we were like, oh my god, that's the out-of-control bride. Turns out she had gone and jumped off a bridge. They said it was postpartum, but she was obviously a really unhappy person anyways. Really effed up. Some of these people are just not happy, and nothing you can try to do will make them happy. I don't know why people marry them. Too many kooks, meddling family members, is another huge red flag for me. Story 96. I used to do hair for weddings of people I knew. There were two that I knew before they even walked down the aisle would never last. One bride had confided in me that the husband-to-be lacked ambition and spent all of their money constantly. She asked for advice, and I told her not to marry him. She married him anyway and got pregnant. He cheated on her while she was pregnant and annulled the marriage before the baby was born. The second bride was an absolute psycho. I didn't know her very well, but she asked me to do hair for her and 3 bridesmaids. She then called me the morning of and said she had booked herself an emergency hair appointment because she was having second thoughts. Whatever, that's her thing. I was kind of relieved. I showed up at the church and started on the bridesmaids. She rolls in an hour later, screaming her head off about her hair. It isn't what she wanted. She can't get married. I played around with it and recurled some of the spots she had pulled out. She calmed down a little, for about 20 minutes, before she started tearing fistfuls of hair out of her head and threatening to run her head under the sink. I told her that if she did that, I was leaving. I never ended up getting paid, and I honestly never tried to pursue it. We ended up sneaking our way out of the reception, embarrassed by another one of her meltdowns, and found a group of our close friends doing the same. So we all ditched and went bowling. A few months later, we found out she was cheating on him. She really just wanted a perfect wedding and didn't care about being married.